Welcome to Digital Currents, brought to you by Morgan Creek Digital. I'm Xavier Segura. Each episode, we spotlight the topics and people changing the tech industry with a focus on AI, blockchain, chips, and big data. Thanks for listening, and please make sure to subscribe if you like what you hear. And remember, stay current.
Mark, we're in for a treat today. We have brought back one of our favorite founders, Kieran from now Block Apps, empowering Strato, their amazing blockchain, which we'll go into in more depth. Mark, join me in welcoming Kieran.
Kieran, thanks for being with us. And, I like how we got the blue memo. So we're all in the blue. And I guess the only thing would be better if we were all wearing the Block Apps swag, but all good.
I may still have to mail more out. I think we've distributed some, but there's always more.
Right. This is the part where I'll have to embarrass you a little bit. For the folks that didn't catch the first episode where we had you on, please go back and check that out. A lot of really good insights and just looking where the market is. But so a little bit of the TLDR. So Kieran, you got a really unique background in crypto, and your experience predates a lot of the modern blockchain industry, right? So before the institutionalization of crypto, before DeFi, before NFTs, you were there, right? And you were launching on mainnets and Ethereum before it was a thing. And so now I think you are uniquely poised to do the new thing, right? Which is figuring out how to bridge different worlds of TradFi and DeFi, and kind of this topic known as HardFi. So we want to welcome you back and want to get to know a little bit more about some of these topics. And thank you so much for making time for us.
Of course. Thanks again for having me. The time flies, I'm in the same room as when we did the last one a few years back, and feels like yesterday. You guys look, precisely the same. But
you're too kind. Actually, it's my platinum year, Kieran. I made this up, right? So there's a thing when you're a kid, on the day of your birthday, when you turn that age, that's your golden birthday, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, hey, I'm turning 63. I was born in 63. This is my platinum birthday. Yep. I just had it last week. So I'm feeling platinum right now.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
That couldn't have been more in better transition if we tried.
Because
platinum, as of a rare metal,
not scripted, just real, like our assets.
That's what exactly, real like our assets. That's what we love the show. Mark and I are not above using puns whenever possible. I think they can be a lot of meaning. So on that idea of rarity and of value, maybe speak a little bit, Kieran, about, since the last time you were on the show, some of the growth that you've seen out of Block Apps and how that kind of mirrored a reflection of the market, but then also knowing where we're going.
Yeah. Okay, I'll give a little bit of historical context. We can go into it in more detail as we go. So we have a long background of putting hard assets, real world assets generally on chain, going back to really the first real world asset project on Ethereum with BHP Billiton. That was kind of 2016, 2017 era. So already, getting into the earth, minerals, etc. back then, before there was a name for NFTs, etc. And a bunch of people involved with that project went in their own directions, including us, following in that particular market. So as things have matured, we've all had the enterprise phase, and the enterprise blockchain market really has kind of like ended in one form and transformed in another, right? And what's become kind of enduring about it is it was really about the assets the whole time, and there was a big infrastructure focus. You could think about the early stages of the cloud where people would say, all right, well, you can run it in my data center. And kind of a lot of that has been forgotten. And what we're seeing now is that financialization is the demand. And it started with pure native crypto assets. We wouldn't be here without Bitcoin, subsequently without Ethereum. But you realize that most of the world's value is off-chain still. So stable coins have gotten huge, relatively speaking. So well into the couple $100 billion in circulating market cap. And if you compare that against, let's say, M2 or, just total outstanding treasury debt or something like that, it's getting into the like 1% kind of range, which is like pretty substantial,
Real. From a standing start to 1%. Yeah, it's real.
Pretty real. You look at gold, you look at silver, you look at tokenized stocks, it's more like 0.1% at this time. And so you have the technology being ready. We saw the stablecoin example. It's like, okay, the stablecoin is meaningfully better in some ways than a US dollar, right? If you are, Tether reports that something like 30% of their customers use USDT in a sense as like a primary savings account. So if you're in a country that's inflation exposed or you just don't have good banking access, it's inexpensive, you can use it. A lot of people settle in it, developing world. Doesn't solve US dollar inflation, doesn't solve a more complex suite of financial products that are building up in DeFi and in TradFi. And so clearly the next wave is all of those assets that are in the world today that you haven't been able to get access to on chain. So we made a big bet on gold and silver, really informed by the market, right? Like following our enterprise days had sort of a NFT flavor RWA offering, kind of like an OpenSea for RWAs, in which we brought everything to market: carbon offsets, tokenized whiskey barrels, collectible shoes, etc. But precious metals were actually the biggest volume, the biggest seller, and we kind of realized, the demand for the asset on chain is roughly the same as the demand for the asset overall. Being on chain often brings some additional benefits like enhanced liquidity. And so why do you tokenize? Sometimes you want to sell the asset, but quite often you want DeFi style leverage, purchasing power against the asset as well. And so we're seeing that with our depositor base, folks who have small amounts to really large amounts, relatively speaking, in precious metals. Mostly they want to hold it. They don't want to sell, right? And the assets are relatively inert most of the time. Gold is a very liquid asset if you're trying to, go to a bullion bank and sell it for cash. Otherwise, it's not so much. You got to move it. It's really a store of value asset, not a transacting asset anymore, which is kind of strange given the very long, human history of using gold, silver, sometimes copper.
Let me pause you for a second and just back up 1 second, because the words are important, and you're living it, we're living it, our clients are living it, but there's a whole bunch of people that aren't. And since I'm the old guy, right, I remember the days of, offline, like literally where everything was physical, tangible, hard. Like gold was a Krugerrand, a little coin that you put in your hand, or a bar, and bearer asset. And the quarters I used to get and spend were made of silver, and even the money, because I predate 71, was written on it that you could exchange this for gold or silver. You got a silver certificate. And so all of a sudden that changed. And it took from 1971 to really 1991 when the internet was created. And then we started to move from offline to online. But online, kinda, right? In the sense that, an image can be online, but that bar of gold still has to sit in a safety deposit box somewhere. So really what online was a pointer to a document that was in a PDF form-ish or sitting in a cloud. Now everything is online. Our lives are online, our images are online, our identities online. But now we're moving into this on-chain world. And that's like the longest question ever. But describe the difference between online and on-chain. Like, what does it mean to be on-chain? Because again, just the silly me, I use an example all the time. Let's say I had a bar of gold. Like if I were Kyle Bass, like literally if he were sitting here with us, he could reach under his desk. He has a little safe and he keeps a 26 kilogram gold coin from Australia under his desk. I mean, it's a big ass coin. It's worth a lot of money. And say, well, even if I had that coin, which I don't, but let's say I had a gold bar, I'm not strong enough to break it into 3 pieces. Even if I were strong enough, I couldn't stuff it in the computer and send it to you. So there's something about online gold. It's not really gold pixelated and sent through the air like, Willy Wonka and Mike TV. And on chain must be different than that too. That is the longest question ever in the history of questions.
Yeah. Okay. It is a great question. To your point, even before blockchain crypto, the dollars were getting to be digital, right? They were first, paper notes representing some claim on some gold in some vault somewhere, which is hopefully all still there. Right?
Theoretically, gold in a vault.
Theoretically, there's gold in a vault somewhere.
Right.
It progressed to more like a ledger entry, that some of our smart economists and bureaucrats basically, type some command in, and then the supply of money expands and contracts.
Some central authority by fiat, by decree, says, "Oh, you have money." It's like you have money
now. Usually, if it's better for you to be as close to that event as possible for your, financial prospects and so on. And so yes, for some time, dollars have been digital, and fiat kind of lends itself well to a digital format. And on-chain is different, right? So of course, with Bitcoin, we made it so that in effect, there is no party typing in, expand supply by this amount. There are mechanical rules that control how the Bitcoin gets issued, who it gets issued to, and how it transfers and so on. And so no one Fed or similar to, try to influence to put more or less supply into the world. It's done sort of totally mechanically. And, that could have been the end, right? Like a lot of us have been around for some time in the space. We all hope that we would see, remittances all happening through Bitcoin or through Ether. This was a big thing in the 2010s, let's say early mid 2010s. People would say, look, Western Union's taking 20% on, dollars sent to the Philippines, right? If you send it with Bitcoin, it's essentially fixed fee, much less than 1%. Why don't we turn dollars into Bitcoin on one side, send on the other, convert back? And what ended up happening, to somewhat the dismay of the really hardcore crypto folks, that use case is largely done with stablecoins today. Right. So the way stablecoins work, let's say in the Circle Tether format, which are the biggest ones, you put, in essence, wire dollars to Circle. They hold them in some segregated account. They mint USDC, which is a token, representing a claim on the equivalent amount of dollars. And that circulates somewhat more freely than the dollars. It's always on. There's no wire cutoff window. USDC is deployed on Ethereum and many other popular chains. And so the dollars just move. And in the secondary market, there's no restrictions on how they move. I mean, they can freeze in the case of, law enforcement decree and so on. But really, this is then expanded access to lots of different people. So in the internet version of money, you still had to onboard with the bank. The bank is a ledger of assets and liabilities, not so dissimilar from, there being a paper dollar and that being a claim on some fractions of ounces of gold, and so on. It's a pure digital form of the same, but still relying on the one counterparty, where stablecoins are a move to, it's more like the Circles, the Tethers, et cetera, are the trust anchor that helps keep the dollar. But beyond that, it kind of moves much more freely. It doesn't need to find a route through various correspondent banks to get to a certain destination, kind of, and so on. And so on chain in the purest form, it means like Bitcoin, like if you're like the asset's born, lives, hopefully never dies, completely through self-contained, self-sovereign processes that the software powers, and there's a consensus on who owns what, happening continuously every few seconds or few minutes. But with tokenized assets, you're getting a lot of that, but there's often a real world trust anchor on intake and on exit. And the upshot is it allows you, there's just different forms of value in the world, right? Like the Bitcoin, it's less volatile than it used to be, but it's quite volatile. Like if you wanted to live your whole financial life holding Bitcoin, you better have a lot of it. You better have your expenses sort of tuned to the low end. And it's still hard to convert. You can't quite spend it at point of sale, at least most of the time. In fact, but you can with stables typically, right? Yep. So they're getting to be stable credit cards where, in essence, the funds get sent to a bank. The bank advances the real US dollar cash leg. They kind of settle up on the back end, but to the merchant at your coffee shop, they don't know that you paid with crypto. We actually do support this pattern through partnership with MetaMask. So basically, you can deliver stable coins to the card fronts the cash leg, they settle up in the back end. And so you've got a crypto account. You don't actually need a bank account. It's linked to your identity and to your address on chain. And, this continues to expand access to, a broader world that might not, say, qualify for the bank account. Also, you can borrow, right? So one of the great things about DeFi is there's no questions asked credit. If you got the asset, you can put it in a smart contract and draw stables down against it. So the asset could be ETH, could be, a flavor of Bitcoin, et cetera.
Really, proof of asset. And,
exactly.
And instead of proof of who you are and how you're judged by random credit scoring agencies. But the question I'm still struggling with a little bit, more philosophical than anything else, is an ounce of gold, platinum, silver, this building I'm sitting in, they can't actually be in the computer on the blockchain.
It's true.
Right? I mean, not yet. Maybe Willy Wonka and Mike TV will figure that out. But at least for now, we can't transmogrify, to take a Calvin and Hobbes reference, them truly on chain. So what is it that we have on chain?
So, okay, the kind of like the ritual is important, right? So there's an intake process. So say you've got physical gold. We've got some number of kind of insured partner vaults that do the intake. So you drop it off physically, you mail it, you arrange for a Brinks transport, and so on. They check it out, they assay it, they look at the proof of origin, et cetera. All checks out, you put 100 ounces of gold in, you get 100 tokens back, right?
Yep.
And so there's a continuous audit process that says, the number of ounces of gold in the vault is larger than or equals the number of ounces on chain. So with a solid trust anchor, we're trying to be kind of pragmatic, right? Like there's a flavor of Bitcoin person or hardcore, crypto asset only person that doesn't like this pattern. But what we're seeing just empirically is that, stable coins, tokenized asset, market cap on chain continues to go up independent of kind of the adoption of the pure crypto assets, at least in terms of price level. Like there is independent demand for this asset type. So with that minimal trust anchor, if you believe the gold is in the vault, then you're able to trade it dematerialized in a way that lets you trade with anyone on the planet without going and mailing them gold, right? It's like, It is much easier, cheaper, safer to leave the gold more or less where it is. Hey, maybe you keep some for your mattress. But it is just much more liquid in a spendability and also credit form once you've tokenized it. You could think of it as analogous to ETFs too. ETFs are on the order of 1% to 2% of the, GLD is pretty big, IEU, the ones like that. It's actually, in a sense, a stronger claim than the ETF. Like the ETF, they got management fees and all that, but you cannot typically redeem the shares for the gold. Or you tend not to be able to deposit physical gold either. If you're a bullion bank, you can take the bars, drop them off and get shares and get liquid that way. But for an average person, you typically cannot get direct entry into them. And so, you see this a lot. There's and like the bullion banks are the ones with the liquidity to make this happen, right? Like there's a reason for this structure. But there's sort of like a little bit of a two-tier system where the institutional players, they trade with each other at really low fees, and there's a measure of gatekeeping that goes on where it's to preserve the margin they get when dealing with, externals, et cetera. So I think tokenized assets are in some ways just strictly better than ETFs. Similar liquidity benefits, sometimes more. Direct borrowing tends to be cheaper within DeFi than, say, like a brokerage margin loan. It's 24/7, et cetera.
Now, Kieran, you mentioned a pretty interesting thing about just that evolution of Block Apps and Strato, kind of going more on the B2B enterprise side and coming more onto the consumer. And I can't help but think about how that pattern is kind of mirroring what we're seeing in financial markets today. So maybe defining some terms before we talk about a topic that we had a nice conversation in the green room. We always say we can wish we can record what happens prior to the podcast because it's always, unfiltered.
In the room where it happens.
The room exactly where it happened. But maybe this idea of, if you can define for us what you consider is HardFi, right? This idea where we're kind of melding different worlds, and then maybe how that can transition us into thinking about, why hard assets matter again.
Yeah. So I think HardFi, we mean taking hard assets and applying DeFi and I guess some TradFi principles to them to make them more productive. So gold and silver in particular. We haven't done platinum to date. We certainly could. We were talking about it early. Platinum is great in that it's, I think, even, less physical volume taken up than gold per dollar, right? So there's less circulating in the world, but, it's really one of the good things about spot gold and silver is you don't need that much space to store it. Whereas we got like copper, it's like a whole logistics operation.
Yeah.
Probably don't.
Can we make one request, Kieran? If you do the platinum, can we have like a rune style encryption for like the Mark Yusko platinum?
Yes. You get some special bars.
May 9th, 1963. Yeah.
All right.
Great. We're on it. But yeah, so I think these assets have been underserved and so to your point on dealing with the consumer, it's not as if we're like Robin Hood per se that's trying to like really get everyone maybe within a certain age range, et cetera. It's still a specialty product, but you can see and big overlap between kind of like the gold bug personality and the crypto personality. Those who are early on crypto and maybe often held a bunch of gold often are doing pretty well these days. So I would say kind of the aim ends up being more mass affluence to even a certain kind of high net worth. Like who's got a few $1,000,000 of gold sitting around? More people than you would think, but not like no,
it's actually it's an amazing stat in that our image is that the wealthy, particularly multi-generational wealthy, do have these big stacks of gold somewhere, in the vault or in the Swiss bank account. But in terms of ownership of gold, I think I'm pretty sure I saw this number from Morgan Stanley or JP Morgan. It's sub 2%. Like the vast majority of people have zero exposure. And certainly it skews to the wealthy. I mean, the average person who, it's crazy to me, 49% of people in the US don't have stock. Right? They don't have a 401k. They don't have a 403b. They don't have a Schwab account or even a Robinhood account. They just don't own stock. So they certainly aren't going to own gold. But even then, it's much less widely owned than the banter on Twitter would have you believe. And interestingly, I think now the ownership of Bitcoin is higher. And it's funny. I'm with you. I don't know that you have to be either or. They're as much as I think Bitcoin is digital gold, and I think it has all the elements of gold in terms of scarcity and durability and a store of value and can be a medium of exchange, and it's an asset that exists in the absence of a liability, which is the definition of money. It's more divisible and more portable. Like I said, if I had a block of gold, I can't stuff it in the computer. With a couple of taps of my finger, I can send you both Bitcoin. So that is different. But that said, there are things that could happen either, and I never leave it on my phone, so don't try to SIM swap me, but I don't leave it on my phone. But if something happened to the Bitcoin network or, to the internet at large, things could happen. Whereas we've all heard the stories of, the woman with her earrings that got through the war by, bribing the customs official. And physical, tangible value has a role. Probably a small role, but it has a role. The next layer of permanent, durable money, I think, should have an increasing role, and that's Bitcoin. But then there's all this other stuff, which is, what about art and what about collectibles? God love all these kids whose moms are now tearing apart the house trying to find their Pokemon cards. Because the best performing asset in the last 10 years is not Bitcoin, y'all. It is Pokemon cards. And it is crazy. It used to be collectible Porsches, right? Because of the dentist wrap phenomenon. Dentist buys Porsche, wraps it around a tree, end of car. The ones that don't get bought by dentists live on, and there aren't very many. And Jerry Seinfeld will pay you whatever it takes to get that rare Porsche. And so that was number one. But now Pokemon cards have exhausted that, because those cardboard cards that, you open the pack, it's cool. You get the hit, and then they go in a drawer. And some people put them in the sleeves and they look at them occasionally. But I was a stamp collector growing up because Pokemon cards didn't exist. I have in my house somewhere, I don't even know where it is, a giant collection of postage stamps. I probably do have some stamps that are worth a meaningful amount of fiat if I could find them and find a place to sell them. But there was a kid yesterday who his mom found his entire set of 1999 mint, because he put them in sleeves, Pokemon cards. He's like missing two. That's a pretty valuable asset. So how do we put that on chain, or things like that on chain?
So I want to say, just to comment, those sort of things, we're in the AI era now. So it feels like pure digital kind of anything there'll be a few. In number, there'll be more awesome pure digital assets, but there's just the ability to generate anything is so fast and cheap right now. There's going to be a flood, and then you're going to look and see, okay, what's actually scarce, to your point. Pokemon cards are huge. I don't know them personally, but like the folks at Courtyard are doing great with tokenized cards. The mechanism ends up being kind of the same, right? Okay. Like you need some, so the cards are unique, right? They'll be more NFT-ish than gold is, fungible, obviously, or you make it more fungible with the token.
That's a really important point, and draw that a little bit, because people hear that term fungible and they don't really understand it. They're like, oh yeah, I know what that means. But that's a really important point.
So fungible sort of means that there's just, like gold A is pretty much equivalent to gold B, right?
So an ounce coin is basically an ounce coin. Now, one may have a koala on it and one may have an American eagle on it, but it's still an ounce of gold.
And in the worst case, right, you melt it down and it's really the same.
It's really the same.
There's this, final form of it. The institutions like LBMA, Good Delivery bars, which are 400 ounces, I believe. So I mix up my troy ounces, my ounces sometimes. Might be 430 troy, 400 regular, or maybe the other way. But basically, yes. So gold is pure, it's inert, so you can get it down to this common form. Dollars are basically fungible. I mean, actually, often both of these things have serial numbers on them, but you don't really look at that. It's just one is basically equivalent to the.
Yep.
Pokemon cards. One, there's lots of different types. So you might have, I'm forgetting the term.
Yeah,
but
you have a Charizard versus
Charizard. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that is part of it. It's also this quality, right? So part of what you're establishing with the vault on the gold side, but also, so you really don't want to move these things around too much if you want a liquid market, because storage conditions, they can, even too much light exposure can degrade them, or you really want it in that plastic sleeve that keeps the oxygen out. And that's the best way to, the people with the binders are preserving the value by like never taking them out of there, basically. Yeah. And so there are groups that do gradings, I think on a 10 scale where, mint conditions 10, you get pretty good. You've got a first edition like a rookie Michael Jordan. If you get an 8, maybe it's worth $10,000. You get a 9, it's like 100. If it's a mint, it could be a couple. It's almost like a exponential effect for the quality.
Yes,
right. It's the quality drives the rarity, and so that actually makes gold a better, monetary asset, obviously, right? Yes. But from a value perspective, if you're the type of person who saves things and you do it really well, this means you can kind of outperform with.
And I think it's important because it's non-fungible. Like NFT got a bad rap, right? Everyone said, "Oh, monkey JPEGs." No. Non-fungible token. Okay, let's break that down. Okay, anti-fungible, equally substitutable, fungible. So non-fungible means one of a kind. Like that picture back there actually is a one of a kind. Now it's not super valuable, but there's only one in the world. My friend made it for me, and it's got my name in it. And so, I mean, it's kind of cool, but it's a one of one. And so non-fungible just means unique. Token, which everyone's like, oh, that's a little gold coin. I'm like, there's no gold and there's no coins. A token is a line item on a ledger. And ledgers are really important. And they're the basis for pretty much all of humanity, making sure that ownership matters. But to me, NFT missed it because it should have been called digital property rights.
Absolutely. That's how I explain it to people. I say, vehicle title, the deed to your house. Really, it's a unique thing. There's an address, there's a license plate number, a VIN. It's this one. It's not that other one. It's this one. There is only one, and you can transfer it. And to your point, a lot of what governments do is just sort of record those transfers. And
take a cut.
Take a cut
permanently. Yeah. Like when we say we own property, this is the weird one, right? I never really thought about it until crypto Twitter started really railing on it. It's like, well, do you really own it if you have to pay a tax on it even after you've paid off the mortgage? And if you don't pay it, they take it from you by force? That doesn't sound like ownership to me.
The meta landlords at the end of the, you own a layer, but they own everything on some level. I think like Virginia has an annual vehicle tax too. Those usually don't have ongoing per se.
Yeah. So returning, I guess, to gold, and that was kind of one of the core theses about immutability and ultimately a store of value. One of the reasons we invested in block apps and we continue to be supportive in Strato is because we believe in HardFi as a category with enormous potential, right? So if you look at gold, we're talking about that's a market cap of 30 trillion or so in 2025, right? And if you look at the tokenized gold market, as you mentioned, Kieran, it's a fractions of a percentage, right? At roughly 5.9 billion, but it is rapidly growing. And we're not saying that Strato is the only place to buy tokenized gold, but there are some advantages that I think have been really interesting. The idea that you can have you can be a gold holder, but still have access to liquidity without selling. You can manage this diversified collateral positions, rotate between crypto and commodities. And this could, potentially generate yield from ultimately a non yield generating asset, except for, this year where it kind of went through the moon. But maybe speak a little bit about the advantages that you guys are positioned relative to the incumbents.
Yeah. So let's talk about it for a second. Why you would want to hold your gold is, Mark's kind of making the case like those Pokemon cards, you just hold them as long as you can. And why do they keep going up? And, I think often the answer is like, we are sure to print more dollars. We've got a lot of debt. We've got to refinance the debt. I think the world will continue to mostly transact, especially internationally, in dollars for some time. But you're actually seeing a big rotation in central bank reserves where
huge.
I believe it's larger now than dollars.
Yes, for the first time ever. Yeah.
Yeah. And so everyone is realizing that to some degree, we're going to have to break the dollar compact. We got just liabilities beyond what we can pay in a strong, hard dollar. And so we're going to have to make more of them, which means you repay, but you repay in a way that you have less purchasing power than when you lent the US government the money, perhaps. So what do you do? Like, if you're like people, we're, seeing expensive gas, right? And part that's due to the war, but it was probably going to tick up some anyway. We saw really big inflation after just the gigantic money printing events in COVID, and we just seem like we're going to stay on this path, which means that everything is going to get more expensive, and it's going to get more expensive uneven. So immediately when we printed a ton of money in COVID, like PE ratios in the stock market went from like 20 to 4. I don't remember the exact numbers. And the reason is like, the people who get the money first, in a sense, are like the big institutions and the folks with assets. And so the bid first goes into liquid, high quality, sort of scarce stuff.
Yep.
Google's not issuing more stock. You got to acquire it on secondary. It's a great asset. And so that just goes up immediately. And so if you're a person, Mark, to your point, half the country that doesn't have stocks, you don't participate in this upside. And they call it the K-shaped economy. The slow trend is that you can't make it on income alone. You better hold assets because they're all getting more expensive, and maybe getting more expensive faster than you can like get the down payment for the home together. Or so what we let you do is hold the thing you like, right? Gold, we've seen this huge run up. And one of the things, so Bitcoin has digital gold, true. However, it's still kind of a risk-on asset, right? Like markets go up, Bitcoin,
Yep.
Markets go down, Bitcoin goes down. Gold is still meaningfully counter-cyclical, in kind of the way bonds are, right? Like the world looks shaky, gold goes up, silver goes up, oil goes up, et cetera. So if you think about just like a regular person's hedge, they probably want a little bit of each asset class. Now, by making gold easy to acquire in small units, it's not like, so a whole ounce is, I don't know, I didn't check today, $4,700, right? Yeah. You don't need to go acquire a whole ounce of gold. We can do basically any quantity. That's the nice thing about tokenization. You can fractionalize and that makes it just easier to get into the asset. And we've seen folks like Robinhood fractionalizing stocks, and that definitely drove retail adoption. You can get in easily at a small ticket, put a little bit away every month. Then you don't want to sell the thing if you can't, right? People borrow money on the credit card. Sometimes, like in these inflationary times, sometimes to pay bills. This is not a good thing. 24%, 36%, if you could instead hold on to as much of your assets as you can and conservatively get some credit against them, you could, that DeFi borrowing, it's like 4%, and so thinking about it as collateralized against assets instead of your income, like a credit card, you suddenly have a much better deal due to the stronger financial position you're in, and are more able to just get on that asset owner ladder that is just a requirement these days. Again, we're not going to stop printing the dollars. No,
look, it's pretty axiomatic in the sense that debt either has to be one of four things. Either has to be paid back. Okay. And the problem for all the Western nations, not just the United States, but Japan and Europe, and is even if you seized everybody's wealth, forget their income, their wealth, you couldn't pay it back. There's just not enough. Okay, so that's off the table. So then you can restructure it. Say, all right, Kieran, you got treasury. I know you paid 1,000, but I'll give you 500. You got to have a willing person to take the hickey, and most people are going to say, hell to the no. It's supposed to be a government bond. I want my money. So restructuring is hard. It's not impossible, but hard. Third is you can default on it. Nope. Only third world countries with dictators default because they've already stolen all the money before they default. So in lieu of that, people like politics. It turns out politicians like staying in power. I know that's shocking to everybody on this call, but it's funny how that works. So they don't default. Western nations just don't default. So then your only thing left is to devalue. Because if I borrowed $1 and had to give you back $1, but I could print another $1 out of thin air by fiat, now I'm paying you back with something worth 50 cents. That's what works for me. So I get rid of my debt for half the cost. And it's really interesting that this has happened over and over and over throughout the history of civilization. And we just forget, right? We forget that the UK did this in 1843 or whatever it was, 46. I don't remember the exact date. We forget, right, that we kind of did this post-World War II with Bretton Woods. I mean, we had massive debt and we kind of worked out a deal where we erased some of Europe's and so you just erased it. And what that means is things cost more. And to the point of income and wealth inequality, the people at the top, I don't care if a Coca-Cola costs $4 or $1. I really don't. I'm just going to pay for it. But man, $4 for things, and again, I'm just old, but not a nickel, but a dime. I mean, literally, me and Roy Williams were sipping Cokes for 10 cents. And it was the bottle. It was only 7 ounces. It wasn't the full 12 ounces. So call it a quarter, but it was a lot less than $4. And so it's graduation time. And if you haven't watched it, watch Eric Church's address to UNC the other day. It's maybe the best graduation speech I've actually ever heard. I was shocked. I mean, this guy is amazing. But more importantly, there's a speech years ago. Arguably, it was Kurt Vonnegut. It turned out it wasn't. It was a Chicago Sun-Times writer. It was called "Wear Sunscreen," and it basically said, my advice is one, wear sunscreen, and then a bunch of other things. And one of the things he says is, as you grow older, you'll recall that prices were reasonable when you were young. Like, oh my God. Exactly. And yet here we are at much higher prices. I mean, my first house, right, we struggled to buy because we had a little windfall inheritance from when my great uncle passed, $10,000. And that was enough to buy a house. That doesn't even put you down payment on a car now. Right? I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah. And I think maybe we've reached the point of the show where we can maybe go back in time, Kieran, because I remember when we had you on the last episode of Digital Currents and we did the lightning round, there were some interesting hot takes about kind of how the best blockchains or crypto are invisible. And this product is very much a visible one because we can kind of interact that in a special way. So we kind of get to that fun part where we maybe get to see if some things have evolved since your last time, not changed, but evolved. We can always change our mind when we have better data and information. So we'll turn it over to the fun part of the episode, the famous Martin Useful lightning round. I'll take it away.
Well, I don't want to ask the same question. So, all right, so we're going to do lightning. I won't get my notes. We'll just do some things I would love to know about Kieran and about the company. So, Kieran, you're a founder and a CEO, and what what makes great founders? Like, and I know you're a humble guy, so you're going to say, I don't know, but tell me, what do you think makes somebody able to be a founder and someone who likes to build things?
Yeah. I think, a couple baseline things. You gotta be like pretty smart. You probably don't want to be, there's almost an upper limit where if you really should be working in a, top tier math department or physics department or something, you might overthink things a little bit, but you gotta be.
That's a great point. That's a really great point. Overthinking. Yeah.
I think you gotta be smart enough to see around a corner, to be a little bit contrarian, but yes, but not get into the, too much analysis paralysis.
Yep. And okay, keep going.
I was gonna say, yeah, the comfort with like just not knowing what to do and doing stuff has been a continual theme. Like, we've done many things under one roof, conceptually linked, one did lead to the other, et cetera. And, we're at the best point yet in the history of the company. And it's, feeling the real product market fit and the pull. Like, you kind of know when like the customers want the thing almost more than you can deliver it. That's yep. That finally we've achieved at this point. But it's like most of the population is not comfortable just doing stuff. Like they'll sit, they'll think, they'll either not do stuff, they're waiting for direction, they're waiting for a perfect angle, or they're just not interested in any kind of area that's unexplored. Like the frontier spirit, you're going to go out there, you don't know what's there, but it's going to be okay, is maybe the important thing. And to just kind of like be honest with what you're seeing. Like crypto market is like morphed 4 times, in the course of the one company, right? Like and you can't just chase the narrative, but you gotta react to any kind of like, reality has the answer, right? Like often a company is an answer to some lingering inefficiency or something that we haven't as humans dealt with yet, new opportunity that's there, but you got to really be honest about what it is that, because it's easy to lie to yourself. It's also easy to lie to yourself in like friendly capital markets, right? Like everyone suddenly believes that they're an AI founder, and power to AI is awesome. I use it all day, every day. But it's you need that period where you don't know if the thing is going to work and everyone thinks you're crazy. And then you want later people not to think you're crazy. So you want to be like 2 years ahead, maybe not 10 years ahead of the.
Oh my gosh. I mean, there are so many nuggets in that answer that we could literally do an entire show just on the components of that answer. I mean, the one on the superpower, right, which is to act with imperfect information. The vast majority of us want perfect information. And in the information age, that's impossible because you're inundated with information. And every time you think you've got all, something else comes up. And so that ability to just act and do things, I think is an incredible superpower. I loved your point about, look, you got to be honest. And if it doesn't work, you got to pivot. And if it's working well, you got to do more of it. And, there's that great line, right? We should do more of what's working and less of what's not. I mean, kind of a funky thing, but unfortunately, again, human beings are prone to do the opposite. We want to prove we're right. So we try to do more of what's not working to show that, no, we're right. And the market's wrong, or the customer's never wrong. So again, just incredible number of nuggets. So what's been the most fun you've had in building block apps?
Oh man, there's different eras of this. Wow. I'll call
eras of fun. Okay, I like that. Yeah. Different eras of fun.
Ethereum mainnet launch, people went crazy. This was like, we were like, my co-founder was controlling a fleet of like 30 Amazon GPU spot instances, and for like a day was like 20% of the mining power of the network. There's just like this spectacular excitement about this yet to be on technology that I've barely seen since like as for instance for the the Chat GPT revolution that we all witnessed. I would call that like much more mature than Ethereum was at that time. That still got this like, oh my god, this is the beginning of the new internet moment.
Yeah, again, that's such an incredible insight because AI is 70 years old.
It is, yes.
70.
It's funny.
Not like 7.
Like
I mean,
65 years, right?
We've had chat bots since 1957. We've had chat bots since 1957. Now they have gotten better. I'm not saying that, ChatGPT is as good as that, or is less good than that very first chat bot, but we had it in 57, then we had an update in 87, and now here we are in 2026 or 2024, whenever it was released, 23. But I think that's important. And so Ethereum and blockchains beyond Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is a unique animal. Ethereum also differentiated and unique, and to your point, I mean, very new technology. I mean, that's cool. So on the other side, flip side of fun, what's been the hardest thing you've had to do since you started?
Good question. I think like I guess so we've had like a couple different models that got into like a pretty good success level.
Yeah.
Like, a few million a year, kind of like getting like gigantic corporations. Like we had like 10 oil and gas companies transacting in a consortium, or, a big part of like a critical US agricultural supply chain, et cetera. And all of that stuff, you could tell like if the corporates and all that were really committed, the thing could have been huge, 10 years before it all will eventually happen the way that we expected. But it just didn't, a lot of that stuff. Also, the pandemic really made wave one enterprise blockchain kind of not work, right? It was probably too early anyway. But it was actually very collaboration heavy stuff. Like you had to meet with the industry and design data models together and so on. And then you couldn't travel, right?
Yep.
So had to pivot through that. Kind of like had some contracts who were like, hey guys, like maybe we just shouldn't renew this year. Cause like we sort of know that, you've invested a lot of time and money, we've invested a lot of time, but we kind of know that like, you're transitioning, Fortune 50 company, you're trying to get Zoom stood up, so that, or a little bit later, just the prices all went up on, on commodities. And suddenly, this was the thing they had to deal with. So, like also, so I've always been like, kind of like a philosophically fully like a mainnet crypto guy, but I've been early days. It was like the people were so crazy that it kind of like, repels our like, should we go like, there's I like the religious element of decentralization.
Yeah.
It could be taken a little too far. We've got Bitcoin maxis, that's a religion. We've got the Ethereum religion. We kind of got the Solana religion now. Everyone who's holding the bag is religious in a certain way, but it's not even about the money. It's like there's a philosophical purity in the early days, which was both awesome, but I sometimes found off-putting. I was like, we got to get normal people to use this stuff.
Yeah. Yes.
But at the time, we thought we were late in like 2015, but Bitcoin had been there for a while. Ethereum is the new thing. We're like, yeah, this thing, the whole landscape is mature, and of course it's like probably still early. It's now
it's a really important piece of advice. I talk about this all the time. Tim May, God rest his soul, he wrote the Crypto Anarchist Manifesto. He was an original cypherpunk, and he wrote this thing 30 years before this all happened. Like predicted every single thing that was going to happen. It's crazy, and it's only a few pages, but he wrote this thing. And for 20 years, from 1989 no, I'm sorry, for 30 years, from 1989 when he wrote it till 2009, didn't matter.
Yeah.
Because he was a libertarian hermit that lived in the woods by himself and didn't interact with people. So you can have this great idea, but the segmenting yourself off to, oh, I only talk to libertarians and I only talk to cypherpunks. Like, okay, you're not going to change the world. Now, his work did change the world and contributed, along with others, to what we all do now. But I love your point about, look, extreme, you're going to be off-putting to people and they're not going to want to follow you. And in the worst case of extreme, it's where the drink the Kool-Aid comes from, it ends badly. So I love that. All right. Being cognizant of time, what do you do for fun?
I'm a master sprinter. I did indoor nationals last year. I didn't this year. I've been so busy, but I came in like 7th in the 60 meter in a small field.
No, look, it's awesome.
I'm fast in absolute terms, but it's like a good adult hobby because the times are getting faster still, barely. You're getting healthier. You're defying.
I'm going to call you because I read this, that it was good. And there's this young guy, Tyrone, he's a crypto founder and he was a world-class sprinter and I can do that. And I went out and I started too fast and
oh yeah, you got
the muscle in the calf. And I was hobbling for a week. I'm like, okay, I like the idea of this, but I need instruction. So now I was going to ask you, I believe as many, health is wealth. Because without it, nothing else matters. So we know now what you do for health. You run and stay healthy. Okay. And that was the other thing I was going to say is, as a CEO, the perception and true is pulled in every different direction. And again, back to this Eric Church talk, he talks about the 6 strings of a guitar as the 6 foci of your life, the pillars of your life. And the world pulls them out of tune. So I'm like, oh, that's such a perfect analogy. And if you play it, it just sounds bad. And you got to stop. And he's like, you got to have the humility to say, okay, it's out of tune. And I got to take time to tune it back up. So to that point, where do you go when you need to recharge the batteries?
Man, I wish I had a better answer to this. I guess I do it with distraction, like a little bit like intense activity, doing the sprints, sometimes like to take a long drive, go with the, I went to the Keys with the girlfriend recently, for instance, Florida Keys, something where like you can't be thinking about work. Yeah. But even then, the AI was supposed to have us work less. And I think all of us just work more. I'm like, I'll work both weekend days, maybe like a half day, sometimes more. I didn't know I could pre-AI. I was still working all the time, but you can get a little bit more done. Just kind of keep prompting it, and it gets you going.
The problem with AI for me, the problem with AI for me is it's the ultimate rabbit hole.
You can just keep going
because you can keep digging and you can keep learning. And if you are a lifelong learner, if you like learning stuff, there's no end to what you can learn with these tools. Because while I don't think they're intelligent, I think it's a misnomer, and I think they are tools, not this other thing that people believe. But they can process more stuff than any human, and they can reach corners of the world. Now, we still can't get to the Alexandria scrolls because they supposedly got burned up. Maybe not. Maybe we can explore that. But the ability to learn about things, like just a silly example. So we have a portfolio company that we're investing in now, and they have an agentic system that helps companies go from their old code base to new code base. Really good business. And I said, could you use that tool to design semiconductors? Thinking, maybe it's a stupid question. And the guy came back at me like, that's interesting. Yeah. In fact, over the weekend, right, I reverse engineered this open source design tool, and I think we could. And now I got to read. It's 425 pages. And so now I'm going to read the 425 pages because not that I have to, but because I'm really interested in this. And so I agree. They lead you down paths that they're one, wonderful and incredible, but take away from other time. All right. But the 6 strings are important. So you do have to balance the faith and the family and the career and the health.
I don't know the solution in the short run. It's been like a good 4 to 6 months of unbalance, and will end in sight,
Go to an island in Italy or Greece or Spain and just be gone for a week, and that'll help. All right, last one. Where do you look other than the AI tools for inspiration?
I think I try to talk to people and ask just like simple questions about how they achieve things like in their life. Like you'll find, one thing that we found surprising in just our kind of HardFi DeFi run up is like a very big chunk of crypto people don't use DeFi. Like, hey, you ever used Aave? No. Like, you've been holding ETH for how long? 10 years? Like, okay, what do you do when he's like, well, you either don't spend it, maybe you stake it on Coinbase, or you sell it. And it's like, what? Like,
what?
The hard edges of like, the future's here. It's not evenly distributed, right? So if you get a lot out of just observing people in their default behavior. It takes so much people to change, even to something clearly better.
100%. And again, talking to people and listening to them and thinking, wow, they may know something I don't, or they may have insights. And I love your point about observing their behaviors, because we're all, I talk about this, I am the cobbler's kids have no shoes. Don't ask me about my 401k. In fact, I keep it crappy now just because it's so bad. So I have this one rollover IRA from my first job 100 years ago. And it's so badly managed because I just never get to it. And that's just, I'm not proud of it. It's insane. And I should have just given it to somebody to do but you're right. The future is here, but it's unevenly distributed. So I lied. There is one last question. So since you said you like to talk to people, I think I did ask you this before, but if you could have dinner with anyone alive or in the past, who would it be?
Like Newton's a good answer. He's probably a weird guy, right? Like but he had both the physics and like the monetary stuff would be interesting.
He would be incredible to say, what the hell were you thinking?
Right.
Literally. And that's so perfect for right now, because we're watching super, super smart people look at charts that only, like, this is the thing. When a chart does this, there is only one other side. It never goes like this. It never goes like this. It is the Eiffel Tower. I mean, there are no exceptions. Now, you don't know when, and the South Sea bubble and he was one of the smartest guys ever and almost wrecked him completely. And the worst part of it is he got out.
Then got back in. Yeah.
They went back in because it kept going. And so funny. So when I was speaking early on in this whole thing, I was down in the Cayman Islands and I was talking about digital assets, and someone said, well, I don't want to buy crypto or Bitcoin or Ethereum. So how could I play it in the public markets? I'm like, well, you really can't, except there are these two companies where people are using the video cards. Like, I'm a gamer because my kids, and so they're using the video cards to mine Ethereum and some other crypto. So maybe you could buy AMD or NVIDIA. And so now, but here's the crazy part. So, and someone said, well, why didn't you do that? And I'm like, well, I did. I picked one, and I picked the cheaper one because I'm cheap. I'm a value guy. So I bought a little AMD at 2. A few years ago, it hit 30. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm so smart, awesome, out. So my son, he got a little money when he graduated from 8th grade. And we said, all right, what do you want to do? So, buy some Apple, buy some NVIDIA, buy some AMD. I'm like, no, they're so expensive. Don't do that. And he's made almost as much as I made, not quite, but almost as much as I made in a year. I mean, that's not true. He made 4 times his money on AMD in a year. And so, good dad, yesterday, he's like, I texted him like, maybe you should take some profits. Arts don't go like this forever. And you crushed it. I mean, you crushed it. And anyway, we'll see what he does. But he's one funny story on that. So I don't know if I ever told this on the podcast before, but so we had 2 older kids, 37, 35. And then the caboose came along. My wife stayed home with the first 2. She was working when he came along. So he's had a babysitter. And his babysitter spoken solamente español to Will since he was 5 weeks old. So he is bilingual. I am not. And so to help him do his homework, I'll use Google Translate. And I'll say, okay, for dinner, we had mashed potatoes and gravy. How do you say that? And so 6 years ago, when he was 9, I said, all right, when I grow up, I want to be a fireman. He says, no, Dad, when I grow up, I want your job. I want to be the head of Morgan Creek. I'm like, okay, smart guy. What we try to do is we try to buy stuff today that people are going to want tomorrow. So what would you buy? And without skipping a beat, he says, computers with holograms. I'm like, I am out. I am done. You're in charge. Where did that come from? He says, one of my TV shows. Like, you can watch that TV show all the time. And it was amazing. Anyway, so fun stuff. And you talked about it, right? 2 years early, good. 10 years early, bad, because that's the euphemism. Early is the euphemism for wrong. But again, and being able to stomach being called crazy, although, and this, especially growing up in the family you did, you can judge the quality of an idea by the vehemence of the detractors, but also the quality. So when people like Warren Buffett and Jamie Dimon say you have a stupid idea, maybe there's something there. Just a thought.
Right. And of course, I think, Kieran, you may have been the first to say Newton as the person to meet, but that's perfectly in keeping with bringing all the way back to your original background in math and physics. So a perfectly on brand answer there. Maybe we wouldn't let you go without maybe any big news or update that you want to share with the audience listening.
Oh, yes, absolutely. So in the spirit of being early, so we've been running as a sort of a sovereign L1 chain for a couple of years now. And there are a bunch of aspects to that. For instance, you need a mechanism to meter the thing. So we actually have a native stable coin. That's what you kind of pay the gas in for those in the know. But it isn't really all the way there until you get your equivalent of Bitcoin, of Ether, et cetera. What's the real native commodity at the center of the system that's not, dollar pegged and so on. And so we will be doing this very soon. So think of it, it's called Strato. The token will be called Strato. Think of it as like Ether, but also a little bit like Hyperliquid for fans out there, where it's got some of the DeFi features to it. So you can stake it. When we have in-system borrowing, it will be a little bit less expensive. If you hold some of it, you need to hold a minimum to run a validator and so on. And so it will be the mechanism by which the main way to participate in the network going forward. And so, yes, very, very soon we'll kind of complete the public journey from Ethereum to our own to the enterprise and back again, release the native token. So, and thanks guys for your support all the way along.
Thanks for letting us break it here on Digital Currents. And, we are grateful for the partnership. We are grateful for the, sharing your wisdom and for letting us, break a big story. That's awesome.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we appreciate that, Kieran, and we'll have to invite you back once the launch has been done. Is that we've had this big arc, and it's better to be early in this area than be late and be a laggard and never get off zero, because clearly that's the wrong allocation. So we thank you so much, Kieran, for joining, and we want to remind our listeners, as always, to check out Strato and to stay current.
Thank you for joining us this week on Digital Currents. Check out our links to our website and social media in the show's description box. Please make sure to subscribe if you like what you hear. And remember, stay current.
This podcast should not be construed as investment advice nor solicitation for the sale of any security, advisory, or other service. Investment themes and ideas discussed may be owned by funds managed by the host and podcast guests. Any conflicts at the time of production have been mentioned by the host but are subject to change. Listeners should consult their personal financial advisors before making any investment decisions.